Google just dropped Antigravity and it's already changing everything. I've been in the AI automation space for about 2 years now, and overnight, Google Antigravity has replaced a bunch of tools in my workflow for basically free. And through tons of trial and error about this past month or so, I've actually developed the unique formula to creating effective Google Antigravity workflows and apps using it. And so I promise you by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to use Antigravity effectively to build your own agentic workflows and AI apps. And the way I'll do this is I'll first actually show you and explain to you what Google Antigravity is and why it beats no-code tools. Then I'll walk you through their actual interface and explain to you all the confusing words, nomenclature, everything you just need to understand that you probably already don't know. And then finally, I'll explain to you my special core framework, as well as build an actual agentic workflow live, and so that by the time this video is over, you feel fully prepared to go out and build using Google Antigravity on your own. And if you're new here, my name's Tommy Christ. I'm the founder of Rose AI, where we've been implementing AI into different businesses, specifically AI voice agents, and we've automated over 400,000 calls using AI voice agents. So let's hop into it. And so this is Google Antigravity, a beginner's guide, and we are starting with some foundation setting. So what actually is Antigravity? It's an AI-powered coding environment made by Google called an IDE. And an IDE actually stands for Integrated Development Environment. This is actually a tool that's been around for a very long time. The most sort of popular one is VS Code. But if you've heard of other big companies like Cursor, it's one of the bigger AI startups right now. There's sort of a specialty coding IDE. And basically, it's just one workspace where you can write in plain English, and the AI will actually write the code, organize the files, execute the workflows, etc. You have Google Docs, which is like if you manually want to write, document or, anything you just need to write. For me, it was a lot of essays in school. But then, along came like an AI powered one. So this one's like special. So I like to think of this for documents. You have something like Google Docs. For spreadsheets, you have like Google Sheets or Excel. And so that's like where you organize and build all your spreadsheets. Then for vibe coding or coding, you have an IDE, and that, in my opinion, is Antigravity. It will end up being the most popular one. And so basically it's just a unique software tool for doing this unique task. So like I mentioned, Google Docs for documents, Google Sheets for, Excel files or CSV files, and spreadsheets, and then Google Antigravity for coding. Like I mentioned here, it's a dedicated workspace where basically you have a team of expert developers, the AI, who understand natural language. Sorry to interrupt you real quick, but if you are interested in having AI implemented into your own business, make sure to book a call down below. Let's jump back in. Okay, so why does Google Antigravity actually matter? Especially because there's already tools like Cursor. Well, first, there's no need to learn programming languages. That is a thing of the past, and really you only need to understand really high-level concepts to be able to build functional apps, websites, and workflows, and do it very quickly. And Google Antigravity is better than, just coding using ChatGPT or using sort of like a Claude interface just on the web, because it actually allows you to organize and manage your code space using AI. And that's huge because code actually lives inside folders, similar to the ones you see on your desktop that are probably very cluttered and not organized. That's where code exists on your computer or in the cloud. They're in folders somewhere. And the AI actually helps you and organizes all of that for you, which is very important, and we'll talk more about that later. And then Google Antigravity, despite being a Google product, and Gemini is Google's AI, actually gives you access to multiple AI models and all the leading coding models like Gemini, like Claude, and like GPT. And it's all in one place, Google Antigravity. And on top of that, it has access to a bunch of different extensions, certain agent manager features. Plus, it's completely free to get started with and use. And so in terms of the extensions, I just think of that sort of like an app store where you can add extra functionality on top of what you already get. And so N8N, Make.com, these have all been blowing up online the past couple, I'd say like 18 months or so. And I've actually used those tools, and that's how I got into the space when I started. But now I'm completely shifting over to Google Antigravity, and that's because you get actual code files that you can host anywhere and own. And so you aren't reliant on N8N or Make.com, even if you're self-hosting N8N, because you actually own what you build, which is something you really don't think about when you first get started. But as you scale up, as you want to build more things, this becomes very important. And it allows you to build exactly what you envision instead of being limited to wherever the pre-built modules and templates are inside of those platforms. Plus, you don't pay any monthly subscription. You pay only for the hosting and services you choose. And we'll talk more about this later when we talk about API keys. And then you actually learn actual development concepts while building, which is really important. I think it's a way more in-demand skill when you're looking at, the next 5-10 years than knowing how to use these drag and drop no-code tools. No-code taught a lot of sort of first principles of workflows and coding and how to sort of put that all together. But you definitely learn a lot more in depth of how apps and code actually works when you use something like Google Antigravity, even if you're not learning the underlying programming language. So let me show you right now what the actual interface anatomy of Google Antigravity is. And so here we are inside of Google Antigravity. For a lot of people, when they first look at this, it might feel like when you first started to drive a car for the first time and there's like all these different buttons and stuff, or if you've ever been to have a plane cockpit, there's for sure a bunch of random stuff in there that you really don't know how it works. And so let me break it down for you. And then later when we actually build something inside of here, a lot of this will connect together as well. So don't feel like you have to study it all right now. So there's 3 major windows, as you can see here. Over on the right, we have the actual agent, which will look familiar, similar to ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude. You're able to type in here, and then, it's able to sort of build and execute on what you say over in these other 2 windows. And so this is where you actually interact with the AI. In the middle here is where you'll be able to view all your files and everything that the AI actually creates. And that is viewed through here. And then obviously, the chat from the agent stays over here. And then finally, over on the left, this is basically sort of like a file organizer where you can view all the files that the AI creates. And again, when the AI is coding and generating, an app, a workflow, the way they do that is by creating files. This organization in the left side is really the structure that your agentic workflows or your AI app actually have. And so I just want to show you this real quick when we start to talk about file types and API keys, and then we'll hop back in here once I actually start to build the workflow. And so let me cover some essential concepts that I've actually sort of hinted at, but these are really important to cover before we actually build anything. And so first I want to cover the essential file types that you need to know when you're getting started with Google Antigravity. So first, I want to address .md files or markdown files. And so the way these will look, you'll see any file will be notated by sort of its ending. So if you think of like a picture is .png, a doc is .docx, most Google Sheets or Sheets are .csv. These will be notated by .md. And basically all Markdown is a way for the computer to recognize text formatting. And so a heading, for example, would look like this. My spelling's very bad, but a heading has this little hashtag here. And then, if you want bullet points, it would just be a dash and then a space. And the AI basically interprets this as bullet points and then this whole thing as a heading that's a bit larger, perhaps bolded. If you do want to like italicize something, you put 2 asterisks around it. But really, you just want to think of these documents like instruction manuals that are sort of written in plain English. And these are used for documentation, notes, and giving directions to the AI. And these are sort of, information and context you give to AI, almost like a knowledge base, but a lot more specific, and we'll cover that. And so, for example, this email_sender.md, a file like that might contain instructions that tells the AI how it should execute the workflow when you want to send an email. And this is because you don't want to be in the chat that I just showed you in Antigravity, continually telling the AI how to do its job. And so what you do is you create one markdown file that tells it how to execute one workflow, like sending an email, and then it can just follow those instructions all the time. And then if you ever want to make a change, instead of having to prompt it differently every time or change, a bunch of stuff inside of the AI, or retrain it or whatever you need to do, you can just go to the markdown folder and this email_sender and just change its instructions a bit. And so these files you can actually read and edit super easily. They're really just text like I showed up here with just some simple formatting. And I do want to note, this is not the actual code that runs. This is just the instructions that guides the agent on when to run the code. And speaking of code, I next want to cover .py files or Python scripts. And these contain actual executable code that works and actually takes action and does something. And it's sort of like having a robot that can perform specific tasks and it does it the same way every time. So why this is more powerful than, something like no code, or, if you were just to have AI do that action on its own, is because it's able to do it really, really quick because the script's already written. It just has to run it. So it can do it within milliseconds. Plus, it's really cheap. So these Python scripts are cheap and fast. And for example, we have the email sender.py would be the file that would actually send those emails according to the instructions in the .md file. And so basically the AI writes these and you don't need to understand any of the code inside. I really don't even look inside of my .python files. If something's broken, I'll just tell the AI what's broken and the sort of result of it. And the AI will go in and knows where to find that inside of the actual Python script. And again, I just want to note that these files actually do things when they run. These are, the tools in the tool belt that actually perform the action, whereas the markdown file are the instructions on how to actually build something. And so some other common file types that you'll see is .html, which is similar to markdown, but is specific to web page structure instead of like document formatting. And these are basically like the skeleton of any website. If you've ever like right-clicked, inspected any website online, usually what you're seeing is a bunch of HTML. And then .css is basically web page styling. So this is, on top of HTML. This would be like the paint and decorations of a website. And then .js or JavaScript are the interactive features, like the buttons that respond to when clicked on a website. So you'll see these, especially if you're building like dashboards or AI apps, you'll see these a lot. And so the next thing I want to cover is actually not another file, but it's something called API keys. If you're not familiar with API keys, these are basically the way that any two softwares communicate with each other. And so API stands for Application Programming Interface. And I like to think of APIs like hotel services. For example, the rooms, perhaps the Wi-Fi, especially the gym or room service. So that's the actual API, is these services. Then your unique API key are like the hotel key cards that prove you're actually allowed to use those services. So obviously when you go to a hotel, you get a key card to actually get into your room, and your key card wouldn't work for any other room except yours. Despite it sort of looking the same, acting the same, and every other room pretty much being the same, that is your specific card for your specific room. If you were to go down to the gym, you need that card to get into the gym. If you don't have that card, it wouldn't work. And then, if you want to pay for something, perhaps you show your hotel card and, your room number's on it. And so it knows where to charge that room. And so that's basically what API and API keys are, is some sort of identifier like a hotel key card to figure out, okay, so where are we sending this data? Whose account are we tracking it on? And who are we charging if that is sort of a paid service? And so some examples are like an OpenAI API key that lets you use ChatGPT, and you'd obviously pay for that. It's a couple cents for every time you run it, but they need to know whose account to tie that back to, and an API key is how they identify that. Or another one would be like a Stripe API key to process payments. You obviously want to make sure those payments go to your account and no one else's, and they find that by using an API key. And so these are secret credentials. So if someone gets your key card, they can use your access, and that's a huge problem. You definitely don't want to go around sharing your API keys. And then without the right API keys, your app or workflow actually can't access external services at all, like Stripe, like OpenAI. But APIs are really the key. I'm saying key a lot. But what really unlocks a lot of power in these agentic workflows or AI apps. So next, let's talk about environment variables or .env files. So these are similar to Markdown, but it's basically just a little notebook or wallet inside of your code space where you write down all the important passwords and settings. And so these contain stuff like API keys, which, like I mentioned, you definitely do not want to share with people, database passwords, or any other sensitive information that you need to use in your code for it to operate effectively, but you don't want to share with anyone if you're sharing your code or, showing your code to someone else. And so basically the way this works is that you would have something like this inside of your .env file, where this basically says, okay, this OpenAI underscore API underscore key is equal to whatever this key is. And so this creates a variable where then in your code, you're coding or whatever, and say you need to enter your API key, you can just put this variable, which your AI can then find and know what the API key is. But if anyone were to actually look at your code, all they'd see is this, which means nothing. They don't see your actual API key. And so definitely never share or upload your .env files publicly. that would really be messy and has, you can look it up. There's a bunch of instances of people that actually did do that, and it causes a lot of problems. And so now I want to move on to the core framework, which I create to actually organize all these files, make it super easy for you and the AI to be able to know how to actually execute these workflows and build them appropriately. And so first, I want to cover why this organization actually matters, because a lot of people think like, well, the AI can just know everything anyways, that's inside the code space. So why do I need to worry about organizing it? Well, it's because the AI actually performs a lot better if you give it specific instructions on where things are and what they do. And so, for example, with this core framework, which you're about to learn about in a second, AI actually knows exactly where to find its instructions, knows exactly where to find its tools, and its secrets stay secure, like our API keys, and make sure everything actually has a logical place, making projects easier to understand for both you and the AI, and easier to maintain, especially, if your company grows or if you need to share or work on this code with someone else. It's really important to have an organized code space. And so the C of our core framework is command. And this is basically a markdown file that tells the AI what its high-level instructions are. It's written in plain English. It's super easy to read and modify if you want to change the instructions. Sort of sets the personality, goals, and behavior guidelines for actually generating code. And so, for example, mine helps my agent organize files, fix broken workflows automatically if it detects an error, and find the correct files when it needs to execute some sort of code. And then moving on to operations, this is a folder that contains all the markdown files with step-by-step instructions like we covered before. So this is like having a manual for every task the AI might need to do, because in your code space, you might have 8 to 10 different workflows that you want to execute at any given time. And so having these files makes sure it always follows those instructions appropriately. So some examples would be build website.md, and these would be some instructions on how to actually build a correct website if that's something you're doing a lot. Test app.md, if you need to run some sort of test and do that over and over, it'll do the same way every time. And then deploy project.md if you need to host a project somewhere. So for every task or workflow you have, there should be a corresponding .md file that guides the AI on how to do it, or else AI is sort of shooting blind. You just introduce a whole bunch of error risk, and because AI is never deterministic, it won't do the same thing every time unless you give it some guardrails on what to do. And then the R of the core framework is resources. And this is a folder containing your .py files and other executable tools. These are ready-made scripts that AI can actually use to accomplish tasks, and they're referenced in the markdown files that we mentioned before. And so this is sort of like having a toolbox full of specialized tools. And so, like I mentioned, each markdown file should point or reference to at least one .py file in its workflow, or else it won't be able to take any action. It's just instructions without any tools to do anything. But just know it can utilize more than one if needed. And so think about if you were going to build a house, that's my drawing of a house, and you had some sort of set of instructions on how to do it. Obviously, you want to put up this wall, you need a little hammer. It's not a great hammer, it looks more like a pickaxe. But this would be your Python script. This would be your markdown file, and this would be the thing you're actually trying to build. And so maybe you also need, a drill. It's a horrible drill, but just imagine this as a drill. You also need a drill, and this can go in here too, where, you hammer something, then you drill something, and those are sort of the instructions. This tells you how to do it. These sort of actually cause the house to be built. The instructions just guide it. They don't actually build the house. And then, the house becomes built. So you can include multiple of these tools or Python files in each markdown file instructions. I wouldn't go past like 5 or 6. I've tried and it hasn't worked great. At that point, I just create a different set of instructions, a different markdown file, and then, move this tool over there. And then, tell the AI to like run this one, run this set of instructions, then run this one. And now moving on to the E of the core framework, which is environment. This contains the environment files with all your secret keys and settings. It also includes any temporary files, logs, assets, any of that. This is basically just the behind the scenes infrastructure that keeps everything running. So why this is necessary is, for example, the AI might need to have some temporary files to actually execute the code. An example of this is, when you're, say, working on a math problem, you might need some scratch paper to actually think through the problem. The AI does the exact same things by creating temporary files. Or, for example, I have an AI workflow that generates thumbnails for me. And so it actually stores that thumbnail that it creates in a temporary file, so I can just download it and then delete it because I don't need that in my code space 3 months from now when the video is already posted, taking up, bandwidth of the AI's brain and just making everything sort of messy inside of there. And so now that you're familiar with sort of the high level concepts of what goes into an AI IDE, especially Google Antigravity, let's actually get started building something. And I think if you're sort of confused up until this point, this will bring a lot more clarity to what all these things are and why they're important. And if you join my community using the link down below, you'll actually find in the Classroom tab under YouTube resources, you'll find this video. Obviously, this video isn't posted yet, but once it is, you'll just see it at the top here. And linked right here under resources, you can find this Google Doc with 2 prompts, one to set up your workspace and one for your actual high-level directives for your .md file. And so I am going to take this prompt, copy it down to here where it says Gemini.md setup, actually go into Antigravity and paste this in here and have the AI create the entire core framework and all the folders for me right now. And so now you can see it actually created the entire sort of core workspace, including the environment folder, the operations folder, the resources folder, and Gemini.md. I'm going to paste the new Gemini.md setup prompt here. You can create your own. This is one I found to be pretty effective, and I don't feel like there's a huge reason for you to go out and research this a bunch at the start when I've already found one that works. But feel free as you work. If the agent isn't performing how you'd like, definitely go in here and edit what you need to. So I'm just going to Control S to save that. And the reason this is called Gemini.md is because the main agent I actually use to code here is Gemini 3 Pro. Claude is great at coding, but Gemini 3 works a bit better in Antigravity. It is the native AI that was meant for Google Antigravity, and I've just found it's a lot more effective inside of this IDE. And so you just want to name these high-level instructions or the sort of command, the C of the core framework, Gemini.md. If you are using Claude, you can create one that is Claude.md, and that way you can give it these exact same instructions, but just so the AI recognizes where it's getting its instructions from. And if you're familiar with what system prompts are, this is very similar to just having a main system prompt for this entire workspace. So now that we have all this set up, there's actually nothing inside of any of these because we haven't built anything yet. So what I'm going to be creating is an Airtable CRM that we're able to fully manage and control using this AI agent. That way we don't have to manually update our CRM. Instead, I can just come into Antigravity and tell it, hey, like I got a new lead, here's their name and email, please update this to this part of the pipeline. And so I'm going to prompt it to actually build this agentic workflow right now. Hi, I'm looking for you to build me an Airtable CRM. I want it to have 4 different pipeline stages. Cold, warm, call booked, and client closed will be the 4. And I want you to store their full name, their email, and the company they work for, as well as their pipeline stage. And make sure to build that fully and only come back to me when you need specific permissions or information. And so you can see here, it just transcribed all of that. I'm just going to hit go and see what it builds. And so the AI has been generating for a couple minutes now, and you can see I actually created this walkthrough.md file that explains how it's actually going to set up everything and what we need to actually do to do that. And so what it said is we need to get our API key and our base ID and throw that into this environment here. And so what I'm going to ask the AI is, hello, could you just give me the exact links I have to visit and tell me exactly how to actually get those keys and what I have to actually put into the .env file? And so I'm going to accept that and then send this. So now you can see the AI has now told us exactly what to do. So to get our API key, we come to this link, and now I already have one created, and I can just copy this token ID. But if you need to create a new one, you can just come in here. And then once I have that, I can come to this im.example. I can paste my API key here, and then I need to find my base ID. I have to open my CRM base in our web browser, then look at the URL, and the part starting with app is our ID. So if I come back here, I come to this, and I see this in the middle, which starts with app. I will copy that, throw this back in Antigravity, and then our table name is just table 1. And so table 1. And now I'm going to go back in here and tell it, all right, I have everything I need. Can you test it, see if it works? Okay, so I actually ran into an issue where the Airtable API key was not as long as it should be. And so the AI actually told me that. So what I'm going to do is create a new token, call it test2. In terms of scope, they give it access to pretty much everything. Let the AI decide what it actually needs and doesn't need. Give it full sort of agentic capabilities. And then for access, I'm going to give it access to base 1. I'm going to create this token. I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to go back in Antigravity and paste this here. And there, that looks a lot better. And so I'm just going to Control S to save and then tell my AI, okay, try again. And now let's see if it works this time. And so the AI noticed there are actual issues with the different names that didn't correspond in here because I have name, email, company, and stage. And the AI was looking for full name, email, company, and pipeline stage. So if I go in and I change these to full name, email, company, and pipeline stage. Just want to make sure the capitalization is all correct. So this actually isn't capital. Then I go back and then I can say, okay, try again. I just changed all those names. Okay, perfect. It just finished generating. And now if we go back to Airtable, you can see it actually added this line, testbot bot at test.com, bot inc, and then cold for the pipeline stage. So I'm glad we actually ran into a few snags there because it showed that you can actually work with these agents and that it won't always be perfect. It wasn't intentional, but I like to show everything on this channel. And now let's say I want to add, a new lead and advance, what was their name? Like bot test bot in the pipeline. So I'm going to say, I would like to add a new lead named Tommy Smith. His email is smith@arose.ai and he works for Arose AI. He is a new cold lead. However, I just got my call booked with testbot, so please advance him in the pipeline. So if I say this to the agent, it'll actually follow all of the resources that we gave it, all these .py resources. And it will actually follow the instructions we just gave it. So here we go. I should have probably checked what my transcription tool said. It didn't say Arose, it said Arose AI. But you can see it just added me, or I guess Tommy Smith, my cousin or whatever, to the actual CRM, and it advanced testbot to the call book stage. And then, really the world is your oyster with, if you want to add formatting, you want to add a bunch more columns, you want to automate this, however you want to do it. But I just wanted to show you some of the power of Google Antigravity with a really simple use case, especially one that utilizes API keys. And Airtable honestly has a bit more complicated of a system than some other softwares. But I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.